to share.
Yes, sure. So anyway, I'm very, very excited to be here today, and I'm glad that, so happy I want to say some new things about Mike Gallagher. He's great, pulling this all together. So today we have two colleagues, and we're going to start with Sister Paula Scraba, her co-author. No, she's a solo, and then after we're going to do about 20 minutes each, and then we'll do Q&A at the end. Is that okay with you guys? Okay, fine. Excellent.
How do I fix it so it just shows the main slide? I think you can
Go to display settings across the top.
All right, there.
Yep.
You got it. You hit this one setting, the button. And there's just one.
Okay. So go ahead and start.
Yes.
Because of the time limit, I have a handout with all the slides, but I'm probably gonna zip through some of the slides to give you an idea of some of the things that we've done. So leadership through Special Olympics, serving, learning, leading, it is a course, but also it's part of our Majors Club. We are an official Special Olympics college club. So how did all this begin? Our Bonner alum, Neil Johnson, who's the emeritus CEO of Special Olympics New York, which is the largest in North America and the 6th largest in the world. So you might say we've kind of become Special Olympics University. And so this partnership started probably over 10 years ago, or that, 2007. And it's just continued and it's grown. And so every year we present a conference with Special Olympics of New York at the New York State Association of Health, Phys Ed, Recreation, and Dance to share what we've done. And sometimes we share with our sister college, Niagara and Canisius, the little three, who are also running programs, and also some of the SUNYs. And so the whole purpose of us developing this partnership also has to do with developing the healthy athlete. So what you're going to see is a transition that we've done from what we do in the classroom, how we prepare our student teachers in physical education, to how we are looking at our athletes, whether they're D1 athletes or they're athletes with intellectual disabilities. And so these are some of the projects. Todd Palmer with Enactus site before that has been very instrumental. As far as we know, we're the only university in the world that has trained college students in one country to go to another country, the Bahamas, to actually run a Special Olympics event. So they're trained here. So again, these are some of the things that we've done, as well as certification, polar plunge. The year that Enactus was part of it, we raised over $10,000, and that is like their main resource. So the other thing is that we're tied in with public law, and the opportunity for sports, for whether it's, you'll see that there's actually a physical education program model that teachers can use to providing recreational programs to organize teams. And so, for example, when I get to it, Salamanca is the only school in this area that is paying their coaches to be unified coaches, just like they pay their basketball coach, their soccer coach. Where our other schools in the area, it's the special education teachers that are volunteering their time. But this is, like I said, physical education sports model that we presented at the conference. And the objectives is basically the whole idea of acceptance and inclusion. So it's almost reverse inclusion, that we, I say Special Olympics, has a program that they want to integrate with persons with and without disabilities versus the opposite where you have a school system or a program that's inviting a person with a disability in. We have the people with a disability that are saying, hey, come on over here, we've got something great going on. So that's this model. And our students in the schools follow the national standards, all right? And they also follow New York State standards. And so basically, when I teach here, our sports and games class, I use the rubrics and the competition skill assessment from Special Olympics for our students to learn how to put together a program. So again, it's like the opportunities are just unbelievable if you're willing to look into other opportunities. So as I said, I'm just looking through here. So these are the unified sports leadership. So unified sports are persons with and without disabilities on the same team. So these are some models that are available that our students learn about. So when they actually get out and go into the schools, we're hoping that they're the next generation that will implement some of these programs, not just what we teach them in our field experiences or student teaching. And then as I mentioned about the college club that we are officially part of. And so our big thing is recycling. I think I collected 400 cans last night, bottles, but goes to a good cause. Making a difference through coaching every day. This was one of our presentations that we did. And it's looking at, from the athlete's perspective, what does the athlete want in a coach? And then these were the objectives that we had for that, exploring the needs of in the profession and looking at how do we make a difference in our athletes. The other thing, especially with COVID, and I think what you folks saw in the Olympics with Simone Biles, is our focus now is legacy of a healthy athlete, harmony of mind, body, and spirit. So through our university, SAT, which is the Student Athletic Advisory Council, every NCAA Division I school has one, and the A10 conference that we're in is exceptional in terms of that. And we're very fortunate to have Dr. Claire Watson, who's the director of our health science program over in our new school of health profession, who's the point person for New York State for Special Olympics, New York for the Healthy Athlete program. And so Claire and her students will actually go to regional events and do, the routine testing. Special Olympics New York is, Special Olympics in general is the largest amateur sport organization in the world and the largest provider of healthcare internationally for persons with intellectual disabilities. So we're fortunate to have Claire as part of it. So our students presented this past November with New York State, and we had our athletes that are part of our major present, and we worked with our sport nutritionist here, Dr. Claire Watson, and our sport counselors to put together the program that could be used either for athletes with or without disabilities. So again, sport provides a tremendous opportunity to build service and to build leadership skills for our students. And I think listening to presentation last night and then one the other day is to have students go out and actually work with athletes. So Tuesdays and Thursdays here, we're in Allegheny Elementary School coaching the unified teams, but also to be vulnerable to go around and also collect for a particular reason or whatever. And here I just explained unified sports, and you go in and the websites are, again, everything Special Olympics done is professionally done with top athletes. So, for example, their coaching guides, which will be one of the slides coming up. So Pele, who in his day was when they started putting these coaching guides together, they're put together by the top teachers as well as clinicians, coaches, athletes, and they're very exceptional. So these are some of the programs that are provided through Special Olympics that our students are athlete leadership programs. Again, athletes with disabilities, if they get ready for the national games and you go to ESPN, you'll actually have one of the athletes with the intellectual disability who's now, say, retired from competition, is now the sports reporter with ESPN for that event. So again, it's opportunities for our students to get involved with these. As I said, the coaching guides are exceptional. Nuts and bolts cookbook, really. Everything you wanted to know about a sport, to skill analysis, assessments, and they even have a new program, well, it's not new, it's just revised, is Young Athlete for preschoolers, and is a complete assessment. So again, for school districts. As I mentioned, it's all about the athlete. Athlete-centered programs, and there's a guide specifically that is athlete-centered. So what does it look at? I'm gonna, basically, the psychological issues with coaches, motivation, perception, comprehension, and memory. But these are issues not just with the athlete with disability, but there's not a classroom today, a team today, that does not have an athlete with a learning disability, attention deficit, all right, stress, anxiety. And so what we're giving for coaching tips to modify your program, to slow down, to use simple cue words, is not only gonna help the athlete with the disability, but all students. And so that's the point that we wanna get across to our students when we're teaching the course and when we're actually out coaching, that they remember some of these tips, like perception, that you're assuming, oh, what's happening, and Todd's son participates in this. There's times you can't tell who's the mentor athlete and who's the athlete with the disability, that it's provided such a tremendous opportunity that those mentors work with their fellow students and actually help develop their skills. And what's my time?
You got about 10 minutes.
Okay, good. So I'm just gonna zip through these, but these are other coaching tips. So depending upon if you're working on memory, comprehension, again, how you present your steps to the skills, giving one-step direction versus telling them to do 5 things. I want you to do this over here at this time, then over there, go over that station, is to break it down. And again, it will help all your students and all your athletes. Again, to coach in a positive manner. Pictures worth 1,000 words. Your nonverbal language as well as your verbal language, your posture, these students pick this up. If you're having a bad day and you come in, it makes all the difference. The other thing that is tremendous with this program, so we're gonna be hosting May 4th here, Unified Basketball Competition. And it's the biggest event. We have to reserve to block off our basketball courts because of the parents and the grandparents that actually come to see their sons and daughters, their grandchildren. It's a tremendous opportunity. So the communication with the guardians, the parents, the caretakers, for older individuals that may be living in a group home setting, is to communicate with them and help them and give them some direction. So again, communication is a key, and just simple gestures, how you provide your feedback. There's an athlete code of conduct as well as a a coach's code of conduct. And I'll never forget when I was coaching in Connecticut, we had this athlete, Marty. He was a sore loser. All right, he came from a family of a lot of tremendous athletes, but if he was behind, it's like, so he's in a swim meet, state swim meet, and he sees that he's not going to make it to the finish line to get that gold medal. And he fakes a drowning. So these beautiful lifeguards come in and save him. And it's like, you know. And so meanwhile, everyone in the stands is like, oh, is he all right? And we knew what was going on. So here we are, the coaches, and that's it, Marty. You're out of the pool. Go change. That's it. You're done for the rest of the week, you know. So it's like, but he knew. So again, it's like you work with them, you coach with them, and they're expected. Special Olympics expects you to treat them like everybody else. Was there a lead up to this? Yes. You know, and then the same thing in the dining room. They are taught self-help skills. All right. And so when you go to these events, sometimes it's the first time that they've been away from home or away from the group home. And so you'll have all these volunteers, and you'll have some nice little old lady and come over and say, would you like me to help you cut your hamburger up? And they go, oh, yes, please. And I'll say, no, that's all right. He can do it by himself. You know, and they look at us like, you know, we're trying to help. So again, it's that independence, all right, that we work on. And then so I'm just going, that's it. All right. Social skills. So during the COVID, we could not go and coach. But what Special Olympics started was this virtual program of 8 weeks of healthy fitness. So I had my students actually do this program. And you'd be surprised how hard it was for college students to count how many vegetables, how many bottles of water they drank, how many times they worked out. And it was kind of fun. But again, this was a program that they had, that they set up with coaches, school systems, anyone could do it. So that was the recommended training. Again, these are resources for this healthy fitness program that we have. And then, so this is a program with Special Olympics, healthy athletes, strong minds, interactive learning activities with coping behaviors. So again, this goes back to training people with just a healthy, how do you, if you're having a stressful situation, what are some exercises, breathing exercises can you do? This comes from our nutritionist. So again, whether you're an athlete with or without a disability, there's certain things that are healthy eating. When you're in competition, when you're out of competition, before game, during game, post game, the importance, and we go through this whole thing of chocolate milk versus Gatorade. So again, our pasta before the big game, because that's a tradition. Is that healthy? Depends on the sport, all right? So again, that we look at, and we're teaching our students are learning, and then they're passing this down to the athletes that they're working with. So again, it's just really good, healthy management, managing anxiety. So this was from our sports counselors, steps to take. Again, we know that some of our athletes have high anxiety. If they're on the autism spectrum, we have to know how to deal with that. And you know, when to look at the red flags that are going up before the student has an episode that you can anticipate and say, oh, Johnny, why don't you come over here for a minute and sit down? So how's your day going? You know, just totally distract them from what they're doing. So our students are actually learning this on a first-hand basis. Muscle relaxation, all right. Am I getting to the point? All right, so I want to switch here. So these are some of the actual programs we run. And I want to go to, so this is the unified basketball. All right, and what I wanna do is go to PowerPoint. I mean, the slide, do I have to stop sharing to get to,
No, you should be,
No.
yeah, got it.
okay. But, okay, all right, should be down here. All right, so this is our one of our programs. Oh, volume,
Well, our partnership with St. Bonaventure, it's always been a strong partnership, and we've been very excited to be a part of the unified sports, either through basketball or soccer.
Inside of our foot. We want to get it up into the air. As a team, we usually work a bunch of the Special Olympic events, but I could say that working the soccer one is definitely the best one. Yeah, it's really fun. We get to share our passion of the game with them, and when they are out there, you know, jumping up and down after they score a goal and cheering, celebrating, it really means a lot to us.
This is the fall time, so there's a lot of events that you look forward to, you know, in terms of big games within our A-10 schedule and whatnot, but this is by far the most important event on our fall schedule. But we look forward to,
so this
number
was
one,
a
being a part
coaching
of-
clinic, so
partnering
the
up with
drills
Special
they're
Olympics.
doing are
But number two,
actually
it's being a shift in our local community. out
Special
here. You know, we talk about
Olympics
being a
required
big part of our local community.
clinic
And
skills
today,
that
it's
coaches need
just
to
one little piece of
learn.
that. Everybody learns from each other, and I think that's true of the student athletes as well as the children that they work with.
Probably what I like best are seeing the friendships that develop through the unified sports. You know, students are paired together that normally wouldn't be paired together in athletic events. And this is a case where, you know, sports really do bring kids together, and it's quite a credit to the university and the community. They had a chance for the students to come down and actually play on the field, really makes them feel important. I think draws attention to how great the program is.
You know, my wife's like, what do you do? After, 6 months of doing this, she's seeing all the changes in the house. She says, I want to do this.
Yeah, I'm ready for it.
Yeah, she's
Little nice clothes in there.
There's a spirit about St. Bonaventure.
That was good.
Don't worry, Sister Paul, we have problems with all the time. I promise you. And somebody who should not have a problem with control is Dr. Paul Barretta. No, not you, you're not. This man is used to the control.
See how my memory is. Go. All right. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be back in this room. All right, so in person and virtual sense of community in collegiate athletes or athletics. Brief background about how this came about. I've done previous research on brand community. So in marketing, one of the communities we talk about is brand community. And I've also done research on perceived authenticity. So when I saw the call for papers for leadership and authentic community, my brain just like perked up. It's like, wow, this looks great. And it involves Mike Gallagher, so wow. And it involves St. Bonaventure University, so yay! So I began investigating different areas. And one of the areas where they've done a lot of research on community is in athletics. And I started racking my brain, and I'm like, athletics, and I thought about the person in my current institution's athletics department, Nicole, and she is brilliant, and she works with athletes all the time. And so and she's a wonderful person. I figured it would make a great collaboration. So I called her and said, Nicole, you want to work on something together? And she said yes. And I have no idea if how Zoom is working, but Nicole is joining us by Zoom. So everyone say hi, Nicole.
Hi,
Hi, Nicole.
Okay, great.
Hello, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me,
Talk,
but
I'm not sure if I
hello.
can hear you. I see her microphone going up and down. So I assume that Nicole is saying hello, but unfortunately we can't hear you, Nicole. I'm so sorry. But she's with us. All right, so some brief theory. 1996, Hill, either Jean or Jean Hill, suggested that psychological community is an area of research closely tied to context. In other words, research community for athletes is different than community for academics, which is different for community of professionals of a certain industry, so on and so forth. And that it was kind of a call for more research into sense of community and psychological community, particularly in terms of being able to develop measurements. Warner and Dixon in 2010 did a qualitative study for athletes, and they used collegiate athletes. Actually, they used former collegiate athletes, but it was purely qualitative. But they did develop a kind of model of what goes into the sense of community. And you can see they came up with 5. They came up with 5 some constructs that lead to a sense of community in athletes. And you can see them there. We're going to be looking at those later, so you don't have to memorize them. Because then in 2013, Warner, Kerman, and Walker used non-collegiate athletes to develop a measurement scale. And they did this actually with youth sports, youth athletes of a pretty wide age range. And they added 2 other dimensions of sense of community in athletes, which was common interest and voluntary action. On the community side, I did some work on virtual brand community and crowdsourcing innovation. And what came out of that is that consumers from outside the virtual community may not think about, the only ones who care what happens in the virtual community is the people in the virtual community, not other people. So the important part for today's presentation is this, that part of what we know about in-person community may not hold true for virtual community. And the pandemic and social media kind of brings our attention to that. So some quick anecdotal points. Community among athletes changed with the onset of COVID. The keynote speaker talked a little bit about this. Campus was formerly a mutual meeting place. Athletes met on campus, they practiced, they had team meetings, they went to class together. They were also raised in an environment where in-person part of athletic community was strong. Club sports, team sports, community sports. So when remote learning happened, it took away that physical element of sense of community. And so here's where our hypothesis should be. Well, no, next one, sorry. Some other anecdotal, and this I have to thank Nicole because she deals with athletes every day. And virtual space replaced physical space for better and worse. So for better, Nicole noticed that there's a lot of sharing of content on social media that's very supportive. Athletes share their highlight reels. There was an example of a former teammate from one school who was kind of talking up someone who now worked at a different or played for a different institution, right? So that sense of community stayed through a virtual meeting, which is good. And then of course there's the negative, the online bashing and the trash talking, right? So how do we manage all of this? And how do we operationalize it? So our hypothesis is not stated here, but it's, I know it's really bad for presentation purposes, I apologize. But it's because I'm wording it a couple of different ways. As you will see, this is the perfect perfect presentation or perfect stage of research to be at a conference. Because at a conference, we like to share some things and share what we did, and then hope beyond hope, that our fellow academics and students and other people will share with us some helpful ideas. And that's where we are. This is why that box is written. But basically, we're looking for differences between virtual community, team community, and school community. We'll see that in a minute. So we adapted scales from one of the articles I talked about, and we adapted it in 3 different ways: for virtual community, for team community, and for institution. We also adapted perceived usefulness scale from an article in 2010 because we need a dependent variable. We want to see how useful athletes find these 3 levels of community, because virtual has become a large element of community for athletes. We used an online survey. We recruited through college athletes, athletics departments, staff, coaches, snowball sampling on social media. We started, we asked some qualifying questions: sport, division, school, participation in virtual community. I'll get to what we did with that last point in a minute. Some categorical questions so that we can compare things by things like gender. We used an email address for incentives, so athletes, if there are any in this room, athletes are entered into a drawing for a $50 Amazon gift card. So we needed their email address to do that. Now, if a participant answered no to being part of a virtual community, then they were randomized into either the team or the institution. If they answered yes, they were randomized into either the team, the institution, or the virtual community questions. My initial thought was to send all the yeses right to virtual community. Psychology professor made the suggestion that we shouldn't do that because someone could say, at least in the beginning, people should have the right to go to all 3. Otherwise, there could be self-selection bias. Well, a different kind of bias. What we eventually did was, as we went forward and we were getting so I suspected we were going to need more yes. So now if someone answers yes, they go right to the virtual community. Our analysis. So what the plan is, first, confirmatory factor analysis. We expect our measurement scales to load the way they did in the 2013. And then do mean difference testing for the 3 levels. We suspect that certain things will be higher for virtual and lower than the other. Certain things will be lower than the other, which turned out to be a very promising point in the research. And then we'll use the dimensions of sense of community as independent variables in a regression analysis where the dependent variable is perceived usefulness of the community. January 14th. How long ago? Check the calendar. It's like 3 months ago almost. 3 months. I thought to myself, January 14th to April, whatever, we clearly will have enough data by then. So, we've had 397 people click into the survey, 224 usable surveys. That's the breakdown by group. Factor analysis is messy because we just don't have enough data yet. I'll explain why in a minute. Well, I just kind of explained why. So let me be frank, we're asking for your pity. Plain and simply, we're asking, please pity us. Please pity us that we don't have enough data. And we'll get to the pity part in a minute. But even with a messy factor analysis, we have some really interesting data for the regression and the means test. So we're encouraged. We're on the right path. So we need enough data to run a better factor analysis. Boy, I changed the slides last night and look what happened. Sorry, I skipped ahead in my brain. It's okay. So we ran the separate factor analysis. Now, when you do a factor analysis, you have to have enough data. It would be great to have enough data to do all of our independent variables in one factor analysis. Nearly impossible from a statistics standpoint, because we would need like 900 cases or something. We won't get there, but it's common to do two separate factor analyses with three related independent variables, one factor analysis, another factor analysis. We don't have enough data for that either. We do have enough data to do three separate factor analyses, each with two dimensions. And that's what we did. We did one, the first are both administrative related, the second are both kind of being part of a sport as an athlete, and the third kind of has to do with the competitive part of being on a team. We would love to do, instead of doing three different, we'd love to do two different ones. But don't pity us, help us! We're not just here asking for pity, we're asking for help, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? Please help us. So in other words, what we're asking, if you're in the sound of my voice and you know a student athlete or a coach or an athletic director, an assistant athletic director, if the students have friends who are athletes or if they're athletes themselves, please help. We would love your data. We've done outreach to student athletes, outreach to coaches. Email me and I'll send you an email that you could forward to your student athlete friends. I've got plenty of business cards with that email address. You don't have to write it down. Come to me. I'll give you my email address. You email me, I'll email you back with something you could forward to your friends. Sorry, that was our plea for more data. I hope you don't mind. Because we really want to finish this because it's very encouraging news. Let's get some statistics. Let me show you time. I'm doing pretty well on time. I'm proud of myself. Okay, I told you we did 3 confirmatory factor analysis studies. Not the greatest, but also pretty encouraging. We removed 2 of the original variables that I hope with enough data maybe we could put it back in, but if not, this is still pretty good. We have at least 3 items per scale, and a lot, that's a really high variance explained for factor analysis. So for a messy factor analysis, this is pretty darn good. Okay. Cronbach's alpha, a little low, especially competition, a little low, but not too bad. Common interest also a little low, but not too bad, which tells us we're definitely on the right track. We just need that data. So the factor analysis we're happy with, even though it's messy. Even more happy with the mean difference analysis. So we ran, difference testing, and there were statistically significant differences for all of our independent variables except one, which is equity and administrative decisions. That, for some reason, that was the same across. There were no statistically significant differences. And so here's some interesting. So these are all statistically significant differences. Here's some pretty interesting things. This basically tells us that we're on the right track here, because meaning where the items are affected. Because what it's showing us is that for competition, so these are questions that ask about athletes about competition and how important competition is. And when we get to regression analysis, we'll see why that's important. And what it's saying is that in a virtual world, competition isn't such a big deal. Whereas in your team, and when asked about their team and when asked about so if they took it from St. Bonaventure, the question was worded St. Bonaventure University Athletics. If it was a soccer player, it would say on your soccer team, blah, 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 right? So for team and institution, competition is high. Whereas virtual is low, because it's a virtual community. They're not competing with the people there, necessarily with the people they're dealing with. Therefore, we're really happy about this because it shows us that our approach is strong, it's solid. We should expect virtual to be lower, and it is, and we're happy about that. Common interest, same thing. right? Now, this is where, so this is, the first one was important to confirm our method. This one is important in terms of results because it's telling us that the common interest that students feel in a virtual world is not nearly as strong as it is in the in-person world, with in-person community. And that's leading us to understanding how a sense of community is different in the virtual world than in person. And that's important because so much of athletics is, especially at collegiate athletics, is about building team and is about building through common interest. Perceived usefulness. Oh boy, this one just lights my brain on fire. Really does. Look at this. So for perceived usefulness, this is how useful is your community. Now this is also, by the way, a call out to some institutions. And this will eventually be important to institutions. What it's saying is the usefulness of a team to an athlete is really high, but the usefulness of the institution as a community, as an athlete, is about the same as the virtual world. That's kind of scary when you think about it if you worked in an athletic department in an institution. And this one, leadership opportunity, I wanted to put up there because this conference is all about leadership. It was a little bit surprising to me until I thought about it, about these questions, about what these questions are asking, because what it's saying is that the leadership opportunity in the virtual world is actually higher than the institutional world, than the institution. But that makes sense because you're in an institution, you're thinking about the fact that this is my school, whereas virtual world, you're thinking about, okay, I could just take over a chat or something. All right, final slide. These are the regression analysis. We're the non-significant. So all of these are significant at the 0.05 level as a regression. Actually, the regression variance at 0.01 level, really strong. And what you're seeing is the full data, everything except competition, is a significant predictor of perceived usefulness. So remember, dependent variables perceived usefulness. So in a virtual world, common interest and leadership opportunities are the only two things that lead to the usefulness of that virtual world. At the team level, it's social spaces make sense, they're your teammates, common interest and administrative consideration. Those things lead to how useful athletes see the community of their team, and then the same thing for the school. Okay, and our effect sizes are really strong. I suspect with more data it might actually go down. There's more variance to explain, but still, it's pretty impressive. Now I was going to ask, are there any questions? But before, I would like to reiterate and emphasize, please help. Thank you. Seriously though, are there any questions? And I thank you for your attention.
The perceived usefulness.
Yeah.
What type of variable and how you measure it?
We measured it, we adapted, there's 6 items.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example of a couple of questions that do have the, is this part of my Q&A time? Am I okay?
You're fine, you're fine. We're gonna let you run with it, and then when Sister Paula will go with you some questions.
So for example, my soccer team is useful for information acquisition. Strongly disagree there. And there's 6 of them that talk about like the perceived usefulness of this community. And that's how we measure it.
So it is ordinal value, like continuous, because I want to see what is the effect on the regression.
Finance professor. Yeah, so there's this big debate about between marketing and finance. It's 1 to 6, no middle ground. It is what marketing people consider the word you just said. It's continuous variable, right? And then there's some economists and finance people that say, no, it's only 1 to 6, it's not really continuous. And then we have a big debate and then we end up with the same answer anyway, so we consider it continuous, you consider it. If you ask me that question on marketing, conference, they go down to the finance. Yes, Paula.
This
Oh, sorry.
is so true. As a Kumbaya coach out there, Randy, he has a sign in his office, Kumbaya. It's all about community. But this was so true, well, what happened? I mean, I was just thinking of our soccer team. So, did you find any difference in terms of teams? Like whether it was a women's soccer team versus a men's lacrosse team, a basketball team, in terms of that whole aspect of community? So what happened like with women's soccer, they come on campus a month before everybody else and the whole thing is bonding. Well, their season was canceled, so there was no bonding.
Right.
They lost a couple players, and I mean, to this day, they'll say, it's affected, what's gonna happen in the next 2-3 years.
We see it all the time. That's a great, great question, Sister Paula, and I thank you. The answer is, we don't have enough data to compare teams yet, but that's the plan. So we plan to compare different teams. We plan to compare different sports. We have had, and I appreciate it, by the way, a lot of our data is from St. Bonaventure or Wagner College. So one of the things we can do eventually, when we get more data, is we could compare for St. Bonaventure Athletics and for Wagner Athletics, we could compare your college athletes to the rest of the country's college athletes. We also want to compare divisions 1, 2, and 3. Yes.
Just a quick question. Your graphs obviously depicted very clearly differences between social, team, and institution. But the scales, how practical is that difference that you show on the scales? Because the scales seem pretty narrow, and I could see a much different looking graph if you just changed the scale.
Yes, and the answer to that question is they were all but one combination of there is statistical significance. So even though the scale isn't as high, is wide, the mean and distribution are statistically different. The only difference, by the way, the only one that's not, so we did a Scheffe's test, for those of you who know what that is, to compare within, and the only one that's different before. For this one, my favorite scale, from virtual to team is statistically significant at like 0.02. This is statistically significant from here to there at like 0.051. So with more data that might remain, we're not quite sure. But yeah, good point. The scale, it's pretty close, but and part of it is skewed toward kind of top heavy, so it's skewed left. We may have to transform data. I didn't want to transform data without having a full data set, but we might have to transform data for a couple of variables. We'll see. But very good point.
I'd like to make a statement about community right here, because both of these are really about community. And I gotta say, Jim and I both do projects that require a lot of community, both communities of students, communities we work with. And I gotta say, this has been a very interesting year, I'll say that. Last night I was able, we had our Enactus team, and while you guys having your dinner, they pulled off this absolutely incredible opportunity for us to work in the community. And these three young people, I've got some grandfather up front. One thing that I've noticed, we've had to sort of think about how do you reinvent community post all the digital, but now post COVID. And I think that we all talk about in the classroom, like, are students the same way? Are they acting differently? Different things like that. So I think that's why this is so pertinent. Now, a little statement about Sister Paula right here. When we went to the Bahamas, one day my students came, we found, Palmer is made our 3rd year here, 4th year down to Bahamas. Palmer, we found this really cool school, and it has all these kids with disabilities. And we want to go help them, because when you got a lot of young people, they want to do that. So I went out there and with guys like you, and I went out there and they said, oh, Palmer, we got to do something for the school. And of course, I went out there and we were just talking and doing the thing I always do. And then of course, good students up there, they're holding the kids and like that. They were loving the kids and everything. And at the time I saw that, I had two feelings. Number one, I was really touched by the fact they wanted to work with them. But number two, I could see right away, we had a real potential of objectifying these kids. Because these were kids with, in many cases, severe disabilities. And of course, when you're tiny, it's sort of really easy, and they want to be helped. So it was really easy for us to sort of fall in the trap of being sort of these not well-meaning, but not very good people ultimately. So we came back, and I actually went to Sister Paula. It was a school. The school is totally kids with disabilities. It's quite different from the United States. So I went to Sister Paula and said, Sister Paula, what can we do? And I was thinking Special Olympics, and she said, yo, Palma, we can figure out a way. That's how she talked, by the way. Yo. And anyway, what happened was we went down there, and after talking to Sister Paula, we recognized that we had to bring value to the school. It was just, we just couldn't go down there and hug kids. Hugging kids wouldn't help. It was so demeaning. So I can remember, I think we waited 2 years. We waited 1 year to figure it out, and then Sister Paula, working with folks at Special Olympics, we had our very first, every student had to be trained. We would go with a sport, and then every kid would be trained in soccer or whatever. They had to go online. And then we went there, and we really treated these kids as athletes and individuals. Now, once again, that was quite different than what we did before, but the whole sense of community was so important. I want to thank Sister Paula right here quite personally for being that person and doing that.